The forest embraced Alara with its familiar chill, the kind that settled into bones and whispered secrets only nature understood. Her small basket bounced against her hip, laden with wild herbs that she had painstakingly gathered, hopes of bartering them for bread burning dimly in her heart. Her simple clothes clung to her skin, damp with the persistent drizzle that had seeped through the canopy, draping the forest in a veil of silver mist. Each step Alara took pressed waterlogged leaves into the soft earth, yet despite the discomfort, she found solace in this sanctuary away from the scrutiny of the small, judgmental village she called home. The woods were her refuge, a kingdom where she ruled over her solitary quest for survival. The path ahead wound through the towering trees like an unspooled ribbon, disappearing into the depths where light dared only cautiously to tread. Today, however, there was an unease knitted into the air, something more than the anticipation of another supper of broth and bread. It pressed against Alara's senses, tingling at the back of her mind like an itch unacknowledged. She paused, her breath visible in the chill, as she scanned her surroundings with the instinctive caution of a woodland creature. Then it reached her, faint but present. A low moan carried on the breeze, disparate from the natural symphony of the forest. Her heart lurched as cold realization washed over her. There was someone out here, somewhere in the shrouded depths, a person in distress. Driven by a mixture of fear and resolve, Alara pressed through the underbrush, her every step driven by an unseen force. Her pulse quickened with each rustle beneath her makeshift boots until, at last, she caught sight of a stark contrast to the forest's earthy facade, a man bedraggled and unconscious, laid amongst the roots and leaves. For a moment, Alara hesitated, her instincts crying caution. He was an enigma, a puzzle composed of chaos and quiet. His clothing, though sullied by mud and rain, spoke of riches. A tailored coat, its embroidery now a soaked mosaic of colors, clung to his broad shoulders, his trousers torn and stained with forest debris. Such a man was a rare sight, his presence here puzzling and improbable. Through the layers of earth's smell, his ragged breath sounded, halting and weak. Compassion surged, overriding her wariness, and she knelt beside him, her calloused fingers brushing porcelain skin, cool and clammy to the touch. "Sir," she called gently, her voice a soft melody amidst the rustling leaves. "Can you hear me?" In response, his eyes fluttered, a fleeting glimpse of pale blue beneath lids tremulous and tired. His lips, as of yet unkissed by the warmth of speech, parted with effort. "Who?" The whisper was a ghost of a sound, like dry leaves crunching underfoot. "Hush now," Alara soothed, the determination in her voice as firm as her resolve. "You're injured. If you'll allow it, I'll take you to my cabin." Time seemed suspended as Alara assessed the severity of his injuries. Numerous scrapes and a vivid bruise blossoming faintly beneath his cheekbone told a story of violence and yielded. With trembling resolve, she cast aside her caution, coaxing strength from her lean frame. She lifted him, his weight a challenge no less daunting than her constant battle against adversity, and began their slow, arduous journey from the forest's maw. The wind whispered in encouragement, fluttering Alara's hair as her slender form navigated the twisted maze of trees. Her cabin lay nestled some distance away, a modest structure made of wood and dreams, its walls as rough-hewn as her existence. Finally, as twilight cast its silver sheen upon the world, the cabin loomed into view, its thatched roof hazy against the deepening sky. Alara pressed her lips into a firm line, summoning what remained of her resolve, and laid Liam Hawthorne upon her father's old cot by the hearth. The fire, a small sentinel battling the growing cold, flickered to life at Alara's fingertips, its warmth a fragile bastion against the storm still raging outside. Her hands, quickened by countless applications and remedies birthed from the heart of the woods, moved deftly to cleanse and bind scrapes, dressing his injuries with a tenderness that spoke volumes of her character. As she worked, the harsh reality of her circumstances circled like vultures. She was harboring a stranger, a man who undoubtedly belonged to a world far removed from her own, a world of people who wore wealth as a cloak rather than a burden. Questions echoed in her mind. How had he come to such a state? Was he a victim of nature's wrath or of human betrayal? "Please," his voice broke through her reverie, scarcely more than a sigh. Eyes, blue like a summer sky, locked onto hers, pleading silently. "Help me." Compassion, undiminished by hardship, flared once more, and Alara nodded, the resolve of her heart a whispering roar in her ears. "You're safe here," she vowed quietly, pressing a comforting hand to his brow, feeling the fever lurking beneath his skin. And there, beneath the roof of her father's labor and love, The stage was set for the unfolding of a destiny neither could foresee. The tempest within was as real as the one outside, and it swirled them both together in its relentless embrace, crafting paths yet untrodden and a future unimagined. Thus, in the hushed symphony of the storm's ebb and flow, began the intertwining of two lives, bound by the shared touch of fate and a world far more expansive than either had dared to dream. The cabin was more than just a shelter. It was the silhouette of hope against a backdrop of constant struggle. As the fire flickered warmly, casting shadows that danced upon the log walls, Alara found herself caught between fear and an unexpected sense of purpose. This man, who she now knew as Liam Hawthorne, was like a prince fallen from some distant land, compelling her to both awe and action. Since carrying him from the forest, Alara had stayed vigilant by Liam's side, watching for signs of recovery or worsening. His breaths were shallow, weaving a tapestry of difficult dreams that twisted his features. Every now and then, he would mutter in his fever delirium, his words born of a life unknown to her, mumbles of opulence and betrayal, interspersed with what seemed pleas for forgiveness. Such utterances revealed a truth deeper than mere accident. This was a man at war with himself, haunted by the looming specters of his past transgressions. Alara's touch remained gentle yet firm as she placed a cool cloth over his brow. Despite the tempest of emotions that churned within her, her exterior was a fortress of care and resolve. "You're safe here," she reassured, her voice steady as the hearth's persistent glow. "I'll do what I can." In response, Liam gave a feeble nod, his eyes half-masked but undeniably grateful. She noticed then, in the dusk of her cabin, that his gaze held more than just the haze of fever. It held a flicker of trust, however reluctant. The days stretched into a delicate routine. Each dawn, Alara would set about on her usual foraging, briefly venturing into the familiar embrace of the forest to procure what nourishment and herbs she could. Her knowledge of the woods was precise and comprehensive. Years of necessity had sharpened her senses to a keen degree, allowing her to sustain both Liam and herself. In her absence, she left a small bowl of broth by his bedside, often returning to find it half-sipped, a sign that he was gaining strength against the material and immaterial wounds that marred him. One evening, as a full moon crested above the canopy, bathing the world in its silvery grace, Liam's voice finally emerged from the fog of his suffering, clearer and more lucid. "I suppose I must thank you," he murmured, his voice resembling the tentative crackle of kindling in the deed of flame, "for saving my life, though I find myself unsure if it deserves saving." "Don't say that," Alara responded, her tone layered with earnestness as she tended to the fire, stoking it carefully against the chill of night. "In this world, everyone deserves a second chance. Sometimes it's the hardest moments that bring us to the paths we're meant to walk." He fell silent then, his eyes drifting to the window, where the moonlight pooled like a blessing on the wooden floor. The spectral luminescence seemed to draw forth shadows of memories in his mind. "How did you find yourself here?" she asked softly, placing herself in the chair by his bed. Liam's chuckle was mirthless, more a breath than a sound. "Chased by ghosts, damned by decisions. My life was one constructed on facile foundations, each stone laid with greed and blind ambition. I was undone by what I created." His confession came with the weight of revelation, and Alara listened without judgment, hearing not the man he was, but the truth he was willing to face. "Perhaps," Alara said, stirring her thoughts into words, "that's the gift of calamity. It strips us down to our bones, gives us a chance to rebuild." Their conversations blossomed with each passing night as Alara peeled back the layers of Liam's character, and he, in turn, was shown the facets of her world, the quiet strength that underpinned her resilience and the fierce justice that sparked in her spirit. It was a justice that spoke not only of fairness but of a broader vision, a dream painted in hues of compassion and opportunity. Liam's health improved, indicating that their time together was finite, the world outside the forest keen to reclaim him. Yet the bond they forged in those stolen moments of vulnerability was as enduring as the roots of the trees around them. They spoke of the future, their words tentative but filled with potential. It was Alara's heart that prompted the idea, a vision of forging change from his wealth, creating pathways out of poverty with the resources that had once stifled him in gilded chains. "You could help so many," she proposed one evening, her eyes earnest in the lantern's glow. "Turn your gains into good, offer people like me a chance to rise. To bring about a justice that doesn't just punish but renews." Touched by her unwavering optimism, an ideal so stark against the cynicism he'd known, Liam nodded, his resolution mirrored in her determination. "A new beginning," he agreed, hearing the promise of redemption in her words. Together, through the forest, their visions sowed promises into the wind, preparing them for the days that awaited, a dawn where two souls, kissed by fate, would stand united against the shadows of inequality. As the stars blinked into existence above, weaving patterns of destiny, Alara and Liam slept beneath their constellation, cloaked not just in the safety of his recovery, but in the certainty that comes from embarking on a shared journey toward a just future. The cabin transformed into more than a refuge. It became a crucible of newfound aspirations against a backdrop perpetually tinged with adversity. Alara moved seamlessly between tending the small hearth and nursing the fragile life she'd plucked from the forest. There in the dance of firelight, her resolve began to soften into something that shimmered with purpose. The man who lay recovering, Liam Hawthorne, an affluent enigma from a world apart, touched places within her soul that had never been explored. By the time the fire had settled into comforting embers, Alara had grafted a routine from the tendrils of their shared solitude. She would venture each dawn into the forest, that dew-kissed realm of shadows and light, to gather berries and herbs, aided by years of wisdom passed from forest to child like sacred knowledge. She greeted the woods as an old friend, an ally that had whispered lessons of survival into her ear when the world had turned away. Returning, she'd find the cabin warmer not just from the fire, but from Liam's surreptitious awakenings and the soft words they'd exchange in lieu of formal thanks. One moonlit night, under a sky laden with stars, Liam stirred from his feverish dreams to find Alara silhouetted against the rustic glow, her face lit with a quiet grace that matched the celestial radiance. For the first time, a clarity seemed to settle in his eyes, a recognition of where he was not merely in space, but in a life suspended between ruin and redemption. "I suppose I must thank you," he murmured, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them, the kind of silence that was no longer empty but full of potential. His voice was akin to a long-absent son returning home, brittle and unfamiliar yet welcome. Alara, tending to the flame, looked at him thoughtfully, her fingers deftly rearranging the logs to coax warmth. "I'm just glad you're still here," she replied, her tone carrying not just relief but an implicit belief in his worth. "There's no telling how our paths cross and why. Sometimes, the reasons are beyond us." Liam shifted, testing the strength of limbs that had been reduced to shadows of their former selves. His journey from the brink was as much an inner odyssey as a physical recovery. "I never thought I'd find solace in a stranger's kindness," he confessed, his gaze lingering on the window where moonlight spilled like liquid silver. "My world was built on uncertain sands, and it finally crumbled beneath me." In the sanctuary of her listening, he revealed the pain sewn into the tapestry of his past, a successful man undone by greed, betrayal, and the hollow ethos of his pursuits. Alara listened without judgment, understanding that beneath every successful face lie complex stories, some tarnished by ambition's edge. Asking for help feels foreign, Liam continued, a tremor hinting at vulnerability barely restrained. "But you see right through to the marrow of it all. And perhaps that's the gift of adversity," Alara mused, her eyes reflecting the fire's glow. "It humbles us, shows us the strength in frailty." The nights merged into a series of intimate revelations, the kind of conversations that blossomed in stolen silences and torchlit whispers. They talked about dreams buried under years of grime and the lightness that hope could bring when it was least expected. Alara shared stories of her life's own struggles, the family she lost, the daily battle to scrape together mere remnants. And in turn, Liam began to see in her not a mere rescuer, but a beacon, a person enmeshed in the rich tapestry of survival, an ember of opportunity in his scorched path. In those precious moments, something else began to unfold, an idea as audacious as it was earnest. It was Alara who first gave voice to it, her words like a whisper, holding the promise of a brighter dawn. "You could use what you have to offer something new. Build paths for those left in shadow, not just with your wealth, but with your determination to change the way things are." Her proposal struck Liam with the force of clarity, an answer swimming through the tumultuous storm of his conscience. As he nodded, there was not just agreement in his gesture, but an oath formed from shared resolve. Not a partnership of business alone, but a union of dreams emerging anew, like seedlings breaking through the earth. "Yes," he finally replied, his voice gathering strength with each word. "A rebirth, perhaps. Not just for my life, but how it folds into others." Together, then, their eyes met, and in each other's gaze, they found strength greater than their trials, emboldened by the hope that was once only a distant star on their respective horizons. Spring carved its promises into the months, thawing the remnants of winter and painting the forest in verdant hues. Liam's health flourished, mirroring the budding life around them. But as the forest unfurled its beauty, so too did the realization take root within them that soon it would be time to return to broader battles, the world outside their secluded haven. Together they began to chart this together they envisioned, sketching plans that turned dreams into blueprints of progress. Enterprises molded not from power, but from empowerment. And the society that had once confined Alara's prospects within its narrow bounds became the stage upon which they began to enact their vision of justice. When the day came for Liam to return to the world he had once known, it was no longer as the solitary man fleeing the wreckage of his past. Armed with Alara's wisdom and fortified by a shared determination, he stepped forward into an uncertain future with certainty of purpose. As the forest bid farewell to its temporary charges, Alara and Liam crossed the threshold together. In the rising warmth of a hopeful dawn, their shadows stretched out long and straight, casting new paths in the light of day, charting toward the horizon of justice, renewal, and unyielding hope, a testament to a journey united by fate and fortified by shared dreams of a better future. The sun emerged slowly, casting warm, dappled light through the canopy, as if the forest itself was blessing their journey. As Alara helped Liam across the threshold of the cabin, once a place of isolation, now a crucible of hope and transformation, she felt the weight of their shared experiences settle into something comforting and profound. A strange turning of fates, Liam mused, adjusting to the wooden cane he leaned upon, each step more certain than the last. Standing with you here, I feel ready to face whatever lies beyond these trees. But it has nothing to do with me, and everything to do with us. Alara smiled softly, contraction of her lips, hiding the flicker of pain that arose at the thought of leaving the only home she'd ever known. Her heart was full, yet a twinge of apprehension knitted at its edges, a fear of the unknown mingling with the anticipation of change. This place has taught us much, she replied, glancing back at the cabin that nearly coalesced with the surrounding verdure. But there are stories yet to be written, lives waiting to be touched. Their talks filled the days and nights, and like craftsmen sculpting from both what was and what could be, they debated and shared ideas that flowed seamlessly into their plans. Liam spoke of reshaping his former empire, turning oppressive industry into equitable enterprise, harnessing his connections to forge opportunities where none had existed. What about those who resist? Alara had asked one evening, the sky painted with the amber end of a day. Liam had paused, looking at her with a tenderness that belied the severity of his impending challenge. We'll face them, he said simply, with truth and unyielding resolve. And when faced with rejection, we persist. Every no brings us closer to yes. Alara found strength in his words, a resonance with the same defiance that had seen her through her darkest days. Their unity inspired a confidence within her she seldom felt, a belief not only in their mission but in herself as an integral architect in its unfolding. The day Liam was to return to his world arrived quicker than anticipated, the intervening time consumed by purpose and hope. As dawn's first light crept into the clearing, they stood ready to depart. A piece of me will linger here, Alara confessed, her voice reflective over the symphonic dawn chorus. Along with the person I once was, the girl who loved these woods dearly, but also yearned for more. Liam turned to her, awe and gratitude etched in the lines of his recovering face. You are more than your past, Alara. You've become the guide to my future, a partner in this journey. They walked side by side, footprints mingling on the path that would carry them out of the solace of the forest and into the tumult of society. Together, they navigated the quiet sustenance of their sanctuary back to the path Liam had once dominated alone, a path now flanked with the greenery of renewed hopes and unwavering determination. Upon their arrival in the bustling city, Liam found the landscape had changed in months, only to be reminded that it was he who had truly transformed. He no longer felt the solitary weight of expectant eyes. Alara's presence beside him was like a beacon, dispelling his former isolation with shared purpose. Their plans unfolded gradually, intentionally, yet with an urgency that defied conventional pace. By leveraging Liam's former network not as a hierarchy, but as an inclusive assembly, they began to dismantle the elitist structures that had previously governed through greed and exclusivity. At meetings with Liam's former peers, many eyebrows raised at the young woman speaking with fire and grace, her eyes alive with stories that reveal the impacts of socioeconomic disparity. Alara stood undaunted, bringing raw truths to polished boardrooms, echoing the clarion call for justice she and Liam had mapped out beneath starlit skies. Walls are nothing more than challenges to be dismantled, she declared at one such meeting, her voice steady, imbued with the certainty of one who had scaled walls crafted by forces beyond her since birth. Their audacious projects began to take shape. Women and men alike were included in cooperatives aimed at redistributing wealth through education and innovation. Emerging technology hubs sprouted from desolate urban lots, employing those once disenfranchised, their potential acknowledged and activated. The ripples of change spread from an epicenter constructed as much from dreams as from steel and mortar. What was a vision in the forest metamorphosed into a tangible reality, driven by collective effort and belief. Amid the process, Alara discovered her voice, not only in literal speech but in the way ideas flowed through her, compelled by a passion she never knew could run so deep. Once an invisible force weathered by circumstance, she actively participated in reimagining possibilities for those who followed. It was not without its tests. Skepticism was an ever-present shadow, yet the seeds of doubt only served to strengthen their resolve. Each barrier met with perseverance. Gilbert's own transformation awarded grit to challenge expectations and embody the ethos of change. As seasons turned and Liam's roots deepened into the soil of his new purpose, the lines of their journey unfurled in vibrant promise. Together, they seized adversity and sculpted it into something that reflected not just their defiance of the past, but a proclamation of shared destiny. In shared moments of private reflection, their gazes would often meet, and without words, speak a language nurtured by reciprocity, one of mutual respect, kindled romance and understanding. Years passed, and from struggle and collaboration arose a legacy unscripted and raw, but profoundly impactful. Alara and Liam now stood as the architects of a narrative that transcended their individual stories, enriched by the myriad voices they'd uplifted along the way. Their footprints still wound through the forest where it all began, each step a silent promise kept. Every shadow now a reminder of the light created when the paths of two unlikely allies converged, and together they built bridges to a future once only imagined. In this continuity, justice bloomed, like wildflowers defying the odds to thrive amidst the earth's unfurling greenery, testament to resilience, renewal, and the journey woven with compassion and enduring courage.